Have you ever wondered why the price of eggs can suddenly skyrocket or why products become scarce overnight? The answer lies in the fundamental principle of supply and demand. Today we'll explore this concept through real-world examples, including the recent surge in the price of eggs, the effects of government intervention in markets, and other relevant case studies. Hey there, welcome back to Bear Economics. Today we're exploring one of the most fundamental economic principles, supply and demand. This principle is the backbone of how markets work and affects everything from the price of eggs to your next vacation. So let's break it down. Let's start with the basics. Supply and demand is the basic relationship between how much of a product or service is available, that's the supply, and how much people want it, the demand. These two forces determine market prices. So picture a seesaw. One side you've got supply, producers who want to sell as much as possible at the highest price. On the other side, you have the demand, the buyers who want to pay as little as possible for the most value. When these two sides balance, you've got what we call the equilibrium price. Let's dive in a little bit to the egg market to see this principle in action. In December 2024, the average price of a cost of US grade A eggs was about $4.15, more than doubling the previous year. Now there's several factors that contribute to this. One, supply reduction. So a significant outbreak in the bird flu led to the culling of millions of laying hens, which is just a nicer way of saying killing the sick chickens, drastically reducing the egg supply. Two, increased production costs. Rising feed and transportation costs made egg production more expensive, aka inflation. If you want to know more about inflation, please watch my previous video on this. Prices of the cost of feed and transportation don't just magically rise. There's an economic reason why that happens. This also further constraining the supply of eggs. Three, steady or increased demand. So despite higher prices, consumers' demand for the eggs remains strong, especially during the holiday season when baking is prevalent. This combination of decreased supply and sustained demand resulted in the sharp increase of egg prices observed over the past few years. Let's bring this to life with an example you've probably felt in your wallet before. Gasoline prices. When oil supplies are disrupted, like during war or natural disaster, the supply curve shifts left. Less supply means higher prices. On the flip side, if demand drops, like during the pandemic, when fewer people are driving, prices plummet. Another great example is the housing market. When demand for homes is high, say in a booming city with lots of jobs, but supply is limited because of zoning laws or material shortages, prices skyrocket. This is classic supply and demand in action. Do you remember the PlayStation 5 craze? Demand for the console went through the roof when it was launched, but the supply was limited due to a chip shortage. The result? Prices surged, and some people were willing to pay double or even triple the retail price to get their hands on one. Now, markets don't always function perfectly, and governments often step in to influence supply and demand. While this might seem like a quick fix, these interventions often create distortions that the market eventually has to correct. Let's take price controls, for example. When government sets a price ceiling, like rent control, it may keep housing affordable in the short term, but this artificial limit discourages landlords from building or maintaining properties, reducing the supply. This shortage leads to a housing crisis where demand far outweighs supply. Similarly, subsidies can encourage overproduction. Take agriculture, for example. When farmers receive subsidies for crops like corn or wheat, they often produce far more than the market demands. So this leads to falling prices and wasted resources, with taxpayers usually footing the bill for the excess. But here's the kicker. When governments step back, markets tend to self-correct. For example, if subsidies were removed, inefficient producers would exit the market and prices would stabilize naturally. Without intervention, supply and demand would adjust more smoothly, leading to way less volatility over time. A historical example of deregulation of airline pricing in the United States in the 1970s. Before deregulation, the government heavily controlled routes and ticket prices, keeping them artificially high. Once the market was freed up, competition increased. Ticket prices fell, and airlines had to innovate to attract customers. A more efficient and affordable industry for consumers. So while interventions like this may kind of feel like a safety net, they often delay the inevitable. Markets are incredibly resistant and tend to find the equilibrium when they are left to their own devices. Less intervention can mean fewer artificial shocks and a more stable, predictable economy. So why does this matter? Understanding supply and demand helps you make sense of the world. Why do prices fluctuate? Why do some businesses thrive when others fail? It all comes down to this simple principle. Now it's your turn. Can you think of an example of supply and demand in your daily life? Drop it in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if you found this video helpful. And a quick quote from my favorite Austrian economist. If supply decreases and demand remains unchanged, prices will rise. If demand decreases and supply remains unchanged, prices will fall. These are not arbitrary fluctuations but necessary consequences of human action.